بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. And welcome to Fiqh al-Mu'amalat online course. And today's topic is a continuation of the discussion that we have started, where we started talking about the prohibitions of Sharia and Islamic finance, and we have covered riba, and also we have covered taghrir, deceptions, and today we cover others, and we start with the Ghubn. So the following prohibitions of Sharia is al-Ghubn, or we can call it inequality. It's a kind of injustice in the dealing, which sometimes could be to some extent a bit subjective in the assessment of this kind of Ghubn or inequality in dealing with the financial transactions. So literally means Ghubn, decrease or reduce. That's the literal meaning. But technically, the Ghubn means inequality of price and subject matter of a contract. So there is no precisely equality in the price, but there is a kind of unfairness, that kind of Ghubn. There is a kind of inequality in the price of the contract. That is one of them become less or more than the other, which was not known at the time of the contract. So basically it's a kind of inequality imbalance between the price and the goods. So normally by right the price should commercial, the price you could have a kind of a proper matching, an equality of the two counter values. But here we have a imbalance between unbalanced status between the price and the goods, whereby one of them is more compared to the others in terms of value during the time of the transactions. And this kind of Ghubn is also divided from Sharia standpoint into two. The first one is an insignificant inequality, Ghubn Yasir. So the injustice, the inequality here is a bit minor, meaning it could be tolerated. And the other one is the excessive inequality, which is called Ghubn Fahish. So Ghubn Yasir is a kind of tolerated inequality, and Ghubn Fahish, which is a very significant inequality where the gap and the inequality is a bit visible and could be observed and could be easily identified by the two contracting party or one of them. And of course, from Sharia standpoint, all scholars agree that the Ghubn Yasir is tolerated. It doesn't impact the financial transactions, because normally people tend to tolerate this kind of Ghubn and inequality of the price. Is the same goes to the al-gharar. Al-gharar yasir or minor gharar is tolerated. Ghubn yasir is tolerated. Always when it comes to some kind of prohibitions, the small, the minor part of it is accepted and tolerated because it's a zero to achieve that kind of status, to have a zero inequality, to have a zero gharar, a zero kind of uncertainty. But something which is known, like for example interest is known, and it is easy to measure because it's by number. I give you $10, you give me $11, so $1 is interest if it is has been imposed as a preconditions to extend the loan. That one could be measured. This is why riba is not tolerated even it is small amount. But this kind of prohibitions, if it is excessive, it will be very clear that impact the justice and equality and the consumer protections, if we are talking about the buyer and purchaser and the customer. But sometimes if it is small, the market tend to forgive each other in that kind of transaction. So here, looking at the riba is a bit different than looking at the gharar, looking at the Ghubn and other prohibitions. So And the reason, of course, that this kind of Ghubn, as I mentioned, the minor Ghubn is tolerated because it is very frequent to happen in the financial transactions, and the custom and the market tend to tolerate this kind of inequality in the amount. And one of the reasons that prohibits the Ghubn is the قول الله عز وجل يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل. This is the chapter of Surah An-Nisa, verses 29, where it says that it's not allowed to take basically the property of others without justification, without a proper reasoning, without consent. So the rights of others are preserved, and you are not allowed to take that wealth, that property, unless consent is provided, and that wealth has been acquired through a proper means of acquisition. Otherwise, it will be non-permissible acquisitions of wealth from the others, and it could be regarded as non-halal income for the person. This is if, of course, the inequality or Ghubn or the two counter values, the gap is very big, and harms has been basically a trigger to the purchaser in this case, because normally this Ghubn is more related to the purchaser, it is more related to the buyer, it is more related to the customer, because the financial institutions may sell, the trader may sell, but when in the course of selling, so the price could be very significant, the price could not reflect somehow exactly and properly the commodity or the asset, whereby it has been increased and the value of the what's called commodity or the asset has been reduced. So there is no justice in the transactions, and there is no fairness, there is no quality, and Ghubn or a kind of dhulm has been basically triggered in the financial transaction. So if it is small, so we are talking, for example, for some transaction about cents or dollars, it could be tolerated, but if the amount become big and significant, so here the impact of the Ghubn may trigger the Sharia non-compliance of the transactions. So this is the first one on Ghubn. The second one, prohibitions, is or the following prohibitions is al-ikrah or duress. Duress is not allowed also to be exercised, because Sharia required free consent to be provided in order for you to issue the offer and acceptance. So when there is a bargaining, when there is a negotiations, so the two parties will negotiate. At the end of the day, you make your decisions whether you are okay, whether you accept to proceed with the transactions and purchase the item, or someone has forced you to do so, or someone has forced you and pushed you against your will to finalize the transaction. If it is based on free will, transaction is valid. But if some kind of duress or someone has exercised ikrah upon you, so it may trigger the Sharia non-compliance prohibitions and may render the transactions invalid. So basically the duress or the ikrah is known as to force someone to do something that the person dislikes. Also, but in order for him to remove the harms aspect, he does so against his consent. So basically to force someone to do something against his will, against his consent, but in order for the person to remove the harm from him, so he will express his consent and carry on with the transactions to preserve his life, or to preserve his wealth, or to secure himself from any potential harm to himself or to his family. So meaning transactions has been transacted, or the contract has been executed against the will and the free consent of the person. He's not want to sell, but you force him to sell. He doesn't want to purchase, but you force him to purchase. So that's kind of external what so-called factors push him to do the transactions against him. So this one we call it ikrah, or we call it duress, which is not allowed in Islamic finance and may trigger the non-Sharia compliance status of the contract. So, but for a duress, in order to be accepted from a Sharia standpoint, some of the conditions must be fulfilled. Among them, that it should be from a person, meaning the ikrah, the duress should be from a person who is able to implement what he has threatened. The compellers or the mukrih must be serious in his threat, and the matter under the threat must be very difficult for the compelled to bear, meaning that person who threaten you to sell this house, for example, otherwise he will kill you, or what, he will kidnap one of your children, or he may basically burn your property, and so on and so forth. So this person who's making this kind of threat and warning you with this kind of injuries, it should be a person who is, number one, serious in his saying and statement. He's not making a joke. And number two, he has the power and the ability and the force and the equipments and the resources to enforce what he has threatened. So that's one of the conditions that basically trigger the duress state. But if someone who has no power, has no resources, has nothing, he just say it to you, either he's not serious, or if he's serious, basically he's not able to do it because of the limited resources that he has. So basically the issue of duress will not be clear. You cannot tell the court or tell the other party, actually I sell this property because this one wants to hurt me. But when they assess the status of this guy, basically he's he has no power, he has no resources, he is not well known as the person that may abuse a third party, he has a power to influence others. So basically has to be very careful when you claim that the transaction is under duress. Again, according to the Sharia, the person should have the ability, the resources, the power to implement what he has written, and he's serious on what he's saying. Now, this duress from Sharia standpoint is divided into two. The first one, we call it Ikrah Mulji, which is a complete duress, and the second one, basically, Ikrah Ghayru Mulji, which is incomplete duress. So the first one, which is a complete duress, or Ikrah Mulji, is basically the one which is a threat occur for homicide, is related to some homicide, like for example killing someone, or kind of making a very serious and significant injury of your bodies, or a part of your bodies, or a wealth, meaning something that cannot be tolerated and cannot be borne by the person. So again, or distractions of an organ of his body, or a serious beating that causes fear of distractions of an organ, or for the distractions of the whole property of a person, or permanent imprisonment. So this is a kind of levels that the complete duress could trigger, or what's so called the Ikrah Mulji, is a kind of a very serious impact on the person, life, organs of the body, the entire property, destroy of his property, kidnap of his family, kill of his children, kill of his wife, destroying his property, burning his asset, killing himself, taking part of his organ. This kind of very significant what's so called a threat and danger that the person cannot bear. So as a result of that, he is under this kind of pressure to sell his property. So this one we call it Ikrah Mulji, versus the Ikrah, which is not Mulji, or incomplete duress, which is basically one threat for a matter which not fall under what has been mentioned, meaning it's a kind of damage, or a kind of possible harm that could be bared, that could be basically tolerated, that could be absorbed by the person. So it doesn't lead to destroy of his wealth, doesn't lead to a kind of homicide and so on and so forth. So if this kind of threat and dangers and injury could be bared by the person, so basically the what's so called Ikrah Qimar will not trigger, but it will trigger the Ikrah Qimar. Again, whether it is not tolerated and significant, or it is tolerated and could be managed. So that's one, based on this assessment. So the classifications of what so called classifications of the Ikrah will take place. The following and the last prohibitions in this sessions is the Qimar. Qimar, or the Maisir, or we call it gambling. Gambling also is not allowed, based on Surah Al-Ma'idah verse 90. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه لعلكم تفلحون. لعلكم تفلحون. Again, it's a call from the lawgiver to avoid gambling, because it's a work of a shaitan, Satan, so it should be avoided and should be not used as a means of generating income and wealth. And the Maisir or the Qimar are identical, so either Qimar or gambling, we are talking about the same, they are identical. And the Maisir basically refer to the easy available wealth or acquisitions of wealth by chance. So basically Qimar or gambling or a Maisir is accumulations of wealth, acquisitions of wealth based on chance and luck. In other words, Qimar is the game of chance. So basically you have $100, so you go into a game. So this $100 could bring you by chance 100,000. So it's not like a normal investment, it's not like a manufacturing, it's not like a trade buy and sell. It is just by a chance game of luck that this 100 in a game of gambling could bring you a millions. So this is the game of chance, whereby of course one person will win, the other party will lose. So this kind of wealth acquisitions is not allowed in Islam, and it is not allowed also in the Islamic financial transaction or in Islamic banking. It is very clearly mentioned in the stock screening, whereby criteria to determine the Sharia compliant stock screening is one of them is the riba, which has been mentioned. Number two is the gharar, which is going to be mentioned in the future inshallah, and number three basically is the qimar. So riba, qimar and gharar are a very clear criteria that disqualify the company from being listed in the Sharia compliant stock, of course in addition to the prohibitions of product and services. So again, the Maisir is derived from Yusr. Yusr meaning easy, so easy to get the money by chance, because it's just a person may accumulate 100,000 for spending many years working, and the guy may get this 100,000 over a few minutes. So it is a kind of an easy accumulation of wealth, but based on chance. So this is why the word is called Maisir. Maisir is coming from the Yusr. Yusr means something which is easy to get. Means wishing something valuable with ease and without paying any equivalent compensations, or without working for it, or without undertaking any liability against it by way of game and chance. Meaning that whatever work you spend, it's not equivalent to what you get. The time you spend, the liability, the risk, all this is not equivalent to what you get. Because why at the end of the day, you just put 100, you will get maybe 1 million. You may get 100,000. So the effort, the risk, the undertaking that you have put in place is not equivalent to the amount that has been collected, which is in my example 100,000. And again, it is by way of game and chance. It is not like you're putting that in a manufacturing process, then you sell it, then you generate income. No, it is just a game of chance. So gambling is a form of gharar, because the gamblers is ignorant of the result. You don't know. When you put $100, you don't know whether you will win or you will lose this 100. So if you are not lucky, the 100 is burned in the game. If you are lucky, the 100 may generate 100,000. And of course, the gambling is not allowed in Sharia. It is not listed as one of the permissible item for acquisition. And as a result of that, the financial institutions doesn't recognize gambling as one of the means that generate income and accumulate wealth. So this is some of the prohibitions that has been covered today, which is number one. We have talked about the Ghubn, which is inequality, and we say that the Ghubn is divided into two. Number one, Ghubn fahish, which is very significant inequality, or Ghubn yasir, which is a minor and tolerated inequality, which is normally accepted by Sharia. And the other one is the Juras, which is the Ikrah. And this Ikrah is not allowed in Sharia, because Sharia requires to express free consent in order to engage and conclude the contract. And we said that this Juras could be divided into two: complete Juras, which is related to the Ikrah Mulji, related to homicide, and the other one incomplete Juras, or basically Juras or Ikrah Ghair Mulji. And the third one in these sessions is the Qimar, or we call it Maysir, or which is a gambling, which is not also allowed to be used as a means of generating income. And the prohibitions in Sharia in overall, being this or what's going to be discussed in the future, they cannot be used as a means to generate income. And also you cannot use the money to invest in a companies which their core business is this. Meaning that a company which their core business is interest, you are not allowed to invest in it, and you are not allowed to finance it. And also companies which are doing a core business in gambling, you are not allowed to invest in it, and you are not allowed to finance them as well. And again, one is triggered the gharar, where the institutions is based on a core business, which is the gharar, like for example the insurance. You cannot invest in them, and you cannot also finance them. When it comes to others, for example, like juras and inequality, which sometimes are a bit subjective here, basically, the market practice and the expert will determine what is significant from what is not significant, and the market will be like, and the panel of experts will be the benchmark to determine what is permissible and what is not permissible. With that, thank you very much, and see you in the coming session. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.